Hi, and welcome to Creating Resilience. So today's topics are several. First of all, we will be looking at when overemphasizing can be over-empathizing can be detrimental. What exactly does that mean? It means that we think more of the other person rather than ourselves. And so as a result, we give them the benefit of the doubt and we complain about them. So, hi, Vanessa. I think we will begin with the first topic, which is idea, which is when over-empathizing can be detrimental. So, Vanessa, this was your topic, would you like to start with this?
Yes, absolutely, I would. I just have noticed there have been times for me when I feel I'm thinking of what the person is going through and all the negative consequences that could come from truly holding them accountable. And I start apologizing or making excuses. Like there was somebody who had really violated my boundaries at one point, but this person was from a very disadvantaged upbringing and had a lot of social factors going against him. And so I was reluctant to take the actions that were what, in a sense, I felt justice called for. And I knew that the consequences would be extreme given his situation. And I was very reluctant to do so. And I remember talking to some people who were like, what this person did was pretty awful. Like, how can you hesitate? And I remember thinking, yeah, but think of all the suffering and think of the struggles and the fact that we all come from different upbringings and that certain people's upbringings can really be a disadvantage right from the get-go. So then applying our standards to them that are considered socially just could, in fact, in a global sense, be really unjust. But then the question is, are you letting your own boundaries get stepped on because you're over empathizing and you're letting that person take advantage because you're thinking so much of what they're going through? So that was kind of the question that I was playing with. Are there times when, I've taken self-defense classes where they talk about, women often are reluctant to use violence because they're empathizing and feeling bad for the person. I've encountered that. I feel it like in that sort of situation, if somebody's physically assaulting me, I don't think I would so much have that level of concern because I'm feeling attacked. But I think that's an example of how, in a lot of ways, especially, I don't want to generalize for women, but I think we're kind of bred to or conditioned to really focus on the empathy, sometimes to our own detriment.
Actually, I want to, yes, focus on women because I think that women will make excuses. Oh, he didn't mean that. Oh, yeah. No, he's not going to do that. Or
yeah.
You see people coming towards us and we think, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. We go, no. And then we smile at them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
They're about to attack us.
Yeah.
So, Timothy, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I have 4 daughters, and I get really very clear with my children about always making sure that they're not in any kind of codependent dynamic with their friends, with even relatives, with their teachers even. I have a 16-year-old who's incredibly proactive. She likes a lot of structure, and she might find herself in a position sometimes in the classroom where a teacher is not providing the structure or as organized as they could be, and she might volunteer her times and services. But when it comes to the notion of being empathetic about people as they are encountering their own life journey and you are at an intersect with them, I think it's a very telling thing that we often have to put the brakes on and be very clear about what self-care means first. And boundaries are all individualized. There's no set of boundaries that everybody has to adhere to, especially particularly women. Every woman is comfortable in her skin with different situations and circumstances and events. But when I understand myself going into a narrative about a person and what they might have gone through, I am reminding myself that that doesn't empower them, that it's not an empowering experience for me to then portray them or put them in a box as a victim or someone who is incapable, or more importantly, who does not have a higher power governing their life and their evolution as mine is. And so the most important thing is seeing persons in their greatest light, and holding them to that standard. That means that your boundary is honored. And then, of course, maybe they're up leveling their game in their own personal life as well.
So can we everybody, can you turn your mic on? Just mute your mic for a second, please. So can we actually be empathetic at the same time and not allow people to cross our boundaries or mistreat us, and pull them up to some higher standards, which maybe they're not used to, or they've never come across before, or they've never been held to account to? Would it be then to everybody's benefit to make sure that your needs are taken care of, your boundaries are met, rather than over empathizing and thinking and saying, well, this is what they're used to, or they're going for a really rough time right now, and I don't want to add to it, which is what I did a few weeks ago with someone, only to my detriment, of course. And how then do we decide? I mean, people are going through rough times right now. I mean, people always go through rough times. There's no specific time people don't go through rough times, but right now it's in a massive scale. So do we keep our boundaries really strong? Or do we say, well, they're going through such a rough time, this person's about to be thrown out of their homes. I cannot tell him or her not to be using profanity with me, things like that. What do you think, Jane Elizabeth?
That's a really good question. And Dorit, I think first and foremost, I think personal boundaries always need to be at the really center of who we are, because when you create boundaries, what you're doing is teaching people how to treat you. And, we, even though people go through rough times, we've all been through rough times. A lot of people are still going through rough times right now. It's not an excuse to treat other people with disrespect. It's not an excuse to be rude, to be unkind, to be uncaring. So where somebody is sitting right now with their situation, we can be empathetic towards them. We can say, I understand this person is going through a rough time. I understand this person has so much going on. And we can treat that person with kindness and with respect while still upholding the boundaries we need to, because there may be a time where even though they're going through something rough right now, we may need to step away. Because, when somebody is treating somebody with disrespect, it's okay to say, listen, I know you're going through a really rough time right now. I understand that. I'm here for you. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to lift you up. I'm here to encourage you. I'm here for help as much as I can provide. The thing is this: I ask in return that you treat me with respect as well, and with kindness. And I feel like when you say things like this to people, whether it's somebody you know really well or somebody you've just met, they take a step back and they begin to realize that they have this power to actually choose their own behavior, their own response. Because their response to you or their response to me most likely is a reflection of how they feel about their own situation. It's a reflection of how they see themselves. So it's not about you,
Right.
but they can control their own behavior. And by kind of checking people on that, it's actually empowering them to start to change their own situation in their own life, because it's saying, hey, I'm asking you to, harness your power and to actually start treating me with respect. And you know what they're going to do? They're probably going to take a step back. They might be a little bit uncomfortable. And guess what? That's okay, because that's when we grow the most, is when we're uncomfortable. And they're probably going to come back and say something like, gosh, I didn't even realize that it was coming across that way. I'm really sorry about that. And it's that moment of, wow, I can't believe that I was actually projecting my own difficulties on you. So that can be one response. Another response is that they just step away altogether, and that's okay too. We can't save everybody. We actually can't save anybody. We can inspire people and encourage people. We can be there for people, but ultimately people have to save themselves. And so we're teaching people how to do that when we set our own boundaries. And that's a level of self-care that we all need to uphold. We all need to have this standard, this very basic standard of asking that people show us respect. And when we expect that from other people, we start this cycle. We're breaking the cycle down of people being drawn to negativity, of kind of perpetuating that constant state of being negative, of being unsatisfied. So we're breaking that cycle. We're starting a new cycle of respect and kindness and self-care, no matter what your situation. And then when people start to see that, okay, I'm going to be here for you. What I ask is respect and kindness in return. That's all. That's all I ask from you. And you start to see their attitude change and their mood change because you have their back. You're expecting that they change their attitude towards you. Maybe not towards their situation, what they're going through, but towards you. And then by doing that, they start respecting themselves, which is an incredible thing.
So shall we therefore then as a group just say that it's okay to take into account that somebody's going through a particularly rough time, but that doesn't excuse their behavior? Is that correct? Okay, so I guess, Vanessa, would you like to discuss more of this topic, or should we then?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I also have viewer comments from George McQuaid. Says he has 2 comments. Women have a nurturing nature as caregivers innately in raising their young. It isn't absolute, but it holds true often. I think that's what we're talking about, kind of that's when that danger comes in as women, that we do want to nurture, but certainly having those strong boundaries, I think, is so important. In my example that I had, I knew that setting my boundary was taking care of me, but I knew it was going to have a very, very overly negative effect on this person's life. And so that was the challenge for me. It wasn't just, I was kind of more easily able to set my personal boundary, but the legal boundary was, I felt, going to be very disproportionately harsh on somebody who was already ill and needed kind of treatment rather than legal consequences. But that was the system, unfortunately. And I think that for me was the dilemma. It wasn't just about my own personal boundaries in a sense. And I do think that women do have a little bit more of a challenge. I know in my practice as a psychotherapist, I often deal with that with my women clients, that they're really having a hard time because they do see that person's struggles. So I think keeping those strong boundaries is critical in being at peace with consequences that may not always feel good. And then George's other comment is that unsolicited advice if we hold them to a standard they haven't aspired or asked for? I think that's a great point. I think that in that case, the only thing we can do is sort of, as both Sister Mutique and Jane Elizabeth were saying, is that this is my boundary of how I want to be treated. I'm teaching you how I need to be treated. And I would say in that situation that if that's not what you want and that's not what you're aspiring to, and you're not willing to treat me as I'm telling you I need to be treated, that's fine. Then we cannot interact. We can't have a healthy relationship, and I may decide that I don't want to be part of this dynamic. That's how I would handle it. If this is a boundary that you're not able to maintain, then I don't have place for you in my life. I need to cut that off because that's going to be unhealthy for me. And George follows up saying that was a problem with this system. As you said, we aren't rehabilitating individuals, just punishing and setting them up for failure versus growth in the future. Yes, in my situation, the person ended up going to jail and was not getting the mental health treatment that he needed, that I really felt, especially as a psychotherapist, like this guy is going to keep struggling with this issue if you don't get him treatment. And just throwing in jail is not rehabilitating anyone. It is just throwing people away, telling them that they're worthless and that we're getting rid of them. In addition to which, it's a very biased, in terms of racial justice system, that is not serving anyone but kind of white property interests and that desire for law and order at the expense of justice and at the expense of giving people who have suffered already what they need and the tools they need to be able to take better care of themselves and to be able to thrive in the system. So yeah, thank you for that, George. Appreciate that, those comments.
So should we therefore then consider what punishment means?
Mm-hmm.
We're not actually talking about punishing anyone. We're talking about overemphasizing with them.
Yeah.
And can that be detrimental to all of us? So when it's not a punishment, of course, they might see it as a punishment, but it does not, the intention is to punish them. However, would you all like to move into the concept of punishment? And if we're going to do that, then I'd like to bring in the concept of disciplining children. I know two of you are mothers here, two of us are not, but we were all children, so we know something.
Yes. Yes.
So we're pretty much knowledgeable about mothering. So should we discuss then about over-empathizing with our parents? I hear this a lot where people will, first dismiss that they didn't know what they were doing at the time, but I think my parents knew what they were doing. Otherwise, why did they do it? Are they so unconscious? Are they just so, subconscious? It's something that I think we need. When we have a standard, we cannot have it for one person, and we cannot have it for one group, but we don't have it over here for another group. When we have standards, are we meant to take that standards for everybody, or ought we really to reconsider according to whom we are addressing that standard to, and maybe change it up according to what is going on? Sister Mutique, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, I was just about to add that I would love to separate the two first, the notion of the consequences and a person experiencing your boundaries as a sense of punishment versus the children, if we could, just for a moment. What's really important to keep in mind is how strong narratives are. And that even when we are speaking to having an empathy for another person, it is a very common thing for us to create an entire narrative that we haven't even been privy to. We haven't experienced firsthand. But what we do is we go, oh, poor guy, poor gal, they had this going on, they had that going on, and their mother didn't love them, and they were put in foster care, and they were so rich, they never were given attention. Their parents were just traveling and traversing the world. Whatever that looks like, the narrative is incredibly powerful, but it more or less aligns with these ideas and beliefs that we have. And the very tricky thing, and almost really dangerous thing, is that we're superimposing these narratives on other people. And so the moment that we are considering setting a boundary means that we are punishing them. Even the word punishment is a part of a narrative. What does that mean for one person versus the next one? It's very, very different. But the idea that we are punishing someone because we're setting a boundary should probably be looked at a little bit deeper. When we set a boundary, we are being empathetic, first to ourselves. That's most important. And then after which, we're understanding, again, that when we have a standard for ourselves, we're either asking the person to stop all of their behavior or to change it or whatever that might look like. But essentially, it's not about them, it's about us in that moment, which is the first priority. Very, very important. What that person does with the information is their choice. And we've said that already as well. But the other thing that I want to overemphasize is that how empowering it is that that person has that choice. But that first we idealize this idea that we're this evolved person, that we're able to have boundaries and standards, and that they're not, that there's someone beneath us, that their evolution is different from ours. And it's important that we understand that it is an evolution. Whatever is governing our lives and allowing us to have maturity and allowing us to grow and have expansion and have this self-realization is the same and the truth for them. And we have to give people the space to do that without superimposing our ideas and narratives about their life onto them, without us projecting onto them. And that's a very empowering thing for both parties involved, because now the person gets to sit in that space and they're either going to elevate their dialogue with you and say, just as it was pointing out before, oh, I get it, I apologize, or walk away. But the idea that some consequence is occurring in their life because of us, we're creating a whole nother unnatural idea. Their life and their path is their life and their path. Sometimes we're in the way of that evolving. Sometimes we are creating a circumstance where they don't get to experience the rock bottom so that they can make the choice and the decision to change their behavior, go and get therapy, or go and get the help that they need. Sometimes we have to realize how powerful it is to just simply get out of the way and to not disempower someone anymore with the idea that they can't, they're too weak, they're too sick. That's not nice. That's actually not nice. And when I look at my children, I have a couple of different rules in place in my household. The first of which is that the way that empathy shows up is self-care first. If one of my children are experiencing stress or anxiety about another one of their siblings, I ask them to remove themselves. That's their job. Go and take care of yourself. They can't be in control of anyone else's actions in the house or how anybody else is making them feel. They have to first realize they're taking things personally. And if that's the case, go and take care of themselves. That might be meditation. It might be playing on a trampoline, whatever that means. But the very next thing is that how they see their sibling is really important. My youngest daughter is 9 years old. My next youngest daughter is 11, then 16, and then 26. And yes, they are all in the house with me right now. But here's the thing. My 11-year-old struggles the most with the 9-year-old. And my rule of thumb for her is to see her little sister like a puppy. And I often ask her, if that was a little puppy doing those things to agitate you and create the destruction, the obstruction, or whatever that looks like, you'd be smiling, going, oh my gosh, he's so cute, after he rips up your homework, chews up your favorite makeup, and things of that nature. The way that I ask her to look at her sister is with an empowering narrative that's about her being a rambunctious little puppy. That's what I think we oftentimes have to do for one another. Make sure we have an empowering way we're casting a light on each other.
I'm glad you brought up the puppy analogy, because I was thinking about that just this morning, that the way people treat children is so different than the way they treat dogs, and especially puppies. Puppies can get away with so much, and there are no repercussions. Nope. But child, ooh. So Jane Elizabeth, you had written something about learn to stop apologizing for walking away. Can you talk about that for a moment, please?
Sure. Well, and I think this really applies well to what we're talking about, particularly when we're dealing with parents or siblings. People apologize so much when they stop allowing people to disrespect them, when they stop allowing people to treat them like they are kind of a last thought, because you have these people who will sometimes treat you as though you are nowhere on their priority list. But then the second they need something, they expect that they will be on the top of your priority list. And so what I like to really tell people, I tell my clients this, I tell anybody who is really struggling with their own mental health, with their state of well-being, really, because this tears people down. I tell people to stop apologizing for, walking away from what no longer serves their purpose. And what I mean by that is, think of your life's purpose. Think of yourself as an organization, as a corporation. What is your mission statement for your life? what are your core values? This is something that we do with, human resources in any organization you can think about. And whatever does not align with that, stop apologizing for walking away. So when somebody doesn't treat you well, when somebody doesn't hold space for you, stop apologizing for walking away. Because it's not saying that you're going to close that door forever or that they are not worth your time. It's valuing yourself first, because if you don't make yourself a priority, there is no way that you can show up for anybody else either. So it's really important to understand your own purpose and to live your life with purpose and integrity, to live your life in a way that is serving your purpose. And this can change as you go along, because we do evolve, we do change, and it's okay if, through your journey, through your personal evolution, your purpose changes. It's okay. People freak out about that too. Don't worry about that. It's all right. You're allowed to change, and change is a very good thing. So you'll realize sometimes that your higher purpose is something you never thought was possible, maybe something you feared for a long time. And along your journey, you are going to have to learn to walk away from people who disrespect you, to walk away from people who don't value you. If people do not see you as worthy of their time, then it is time for you to create those boundaries and to create space so that you can make room for people who do care about you, for people who do see you as worthy, because you are. And so this is something that is so, so important. And the other thing I wanted to say is, when we're talking about punishment versus holding people accountable, those are two completely different things. People think they're the same, and they tend to use them almost synonymously. Okay, I'm going to hold somebody accountable, and then I'm going to punish them. They kind of use those in conjunction, but those are two completely different things. So holding somebody accountable is saying, your actions were not appropriate. I expect that this is the way you will behave. And I'm talking about, like, whether you're talking about parenting, like with my daughter, she's only 4. But I do hold her accountable for her behavior. I don't punish her. I hold her accountable, and I teach her through those moments of frustration. I think of how I would have wanted my parents to teach me how to be accountable, how to treat people with respect, how to respect property, how to respect animals, how to respect the planet. This is something that is very, very big for me, because I want her to be empowered to, be accountable for her behavior and her reactions and her responses now. That starts now when she's 4. It's not going to wait until she's 12 or 13. This happens now. And I do that in a kind way. There are times when I'm firm about it. But this is something that starts right now. So she's learning as she goes. And this is something, I'm not a perfect parent. Perfect parents do not exist. It doesn't matter how many books somebody writes. It doesn't matter what websites they have. Perfect parents do not exist. We are all learning as we go. We make mistakes. And this is something that, in my case, though, really holds true, is holding her accountable rather than punishing. So that's something that I think is a very powerful tool, whether we are talking about parenting or we're talking about, other relationships too. So holding somebody accountable for their behavior and teaching them how to, make choices in a way that resonates with their purpose. So what is your purpose? What do you want out of life? And that's something, when you talk to people about their own purpose, their own life's mission, and you ask them, what is it you really want out of life? What is it above all else? If you were to state your life's mission statement, what would that be? What is it you want above everything else? At the end of the day, if you can say that you've accomplished anything, what would that be? And it's really interesting, because when you give people that kind of empowerment, they start to think a little bit differently about their own actions. And this can even start with children. My 4-year-old, I wouldn't use the term mission statement or anything else. It's, asking her, so what do you want to see? Or how would you like to be treated? What do you expect from other people? Or, you know, if mommy was to do this, would you like that? Would that be something that would make you feel good? And then empowering her to realize that she can actually change her own behavior, and holding her to that standard is so incredibly empowering. Instead of giving people an out or just punishing them, accountability, I think, is huge, especially when we're talking about respect and boundaries.
So I am going to actually take this further than what you just said. What is your mission statement? And this is to the entire panel, starting with Jane Elizabeth.
Oh, wow. I would say that my mission statement is to empower people to live the life they deserve and to leave this world a better, kinder, more compassionate place than it was when I entered it.
Okay, who is the next person? Vanessa, would you like to come on board?
Sure. I also have comments from viewers that I wanted to address. Mine would be to show that you can live in joyful, harmonious ways and not harm your health, the animals, or the environment. We can all live joyfully, peacefully together without harming anyone and without sacrificing anything. And I'm doing that through my center, Allura Wellness, which is going to be global, is already global, spreading that throughout the world. And I want to read some of our comments. I just want to emphasize, when I talked about punishment, it was not my boundary that was punishing the person. It was that I reported the person, and the person ended up going to jail rather than getting therapy, which is what I was hoping there'd be some kind of mandated therapeutic program, but the consequence was jail. But as Sister Mutik was saying that sometimes when we help somebody reach that rock bottom, maybe then they will seek out the help that they need, given that the system was not helping this person. So George McQuaid says, definitely apologizing for being true seems to devalue who you are. Yeah. Yeah. And jail was the punishment that I was referring to, which I think is punishment in our system. I think that jail is not a place that helps people. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but from my experience of working with people coming from jail, it's not a helpful place for people to meet their goals, although sometimes it is a rock bottom that inspires them to do so. And Steve Rock and Roll Wood says, I'm both learning and receiving validation of my own feelings. We're delighted to hear that. And that's the whole purpose of this program, to help all of us have that greater resilience during these challenging times. As Dorit says, they're always challenging, but I think right now they're probably extra challenging. This seems even better than one-on-one therapy. Just listening to you all discuss such issues as setting boundaries and punishment. Great that you think that, and that me as a therapist who does do one-on-one therapy, I'm delighted to hear that as well, because I think these are all mediums that can help each other in terms of creating that conversation where we can really focus on what is our mission statement in life, and how do we want to be in this world, and how do we want to react to others, and when they don't abide by our standards, at what point do we walk away, not as a punishment to them, but as saying, this is my standard right now, I need to leave. It not closing the door for the future, but this is right now, and I don't need to apologize for that. And then Steve also says, but what about if their mission statement is perhaps too high of a jump from where they are? Try to help them break it down to achievable steps. Yes, I think that's a great, and he follows up with an example. When I was 6, I wanted to be an astronaut, but my parents came back at me with negative statements, but perhaps I could have achieved that laudable goal if they'd helped me realize small steps with math and science and physical health and not given up on me, and supported you in being what you wanted to be and who you wanted to be. I always will tell parents that your role as a parent, in large part, is helping them become the most them they want to be. Help your kids be 100% themselves, who they want to be, what they want to do. Of course, we shape and guide and teach, but really them fulfilling what they want. So your parents could definitely have encouraged the track that would have helped you with that goal and have encouraged you in that way, and helping you break it down into more achievable things of what you have to do now to get there. How do we help you maximize your success? And he says, watching a healthy interaction is helping stimulate my hope. Thank you so much. Wonderful to hear that. Thank you, Steve, for writing in. We really appreciate your sharing that and are so thankful that you're finding this helpful.
So, Sister Mutik, would you be willing to say what is your mission?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My mission has been for some time to help individuals on the path towards manifesting the life that they truly envision, so that they can have what we consider the legacy of compassion that they're meant to leave behind really unfold while they're walking on this planet. And the most important thing, of course, meaning nurturing whatever that vision is, not waiting, being in the now with that, and really prospering in the vision that they're holding for themselves.
Lovely. Okay, so we're asking this also of the viewers, if anybody wants to respond to that. And this, to me, brings us to the next topic, which was, what exactly is self-worth? And is it different from self-esteem? Who wants to go first? Just put your hands up, and I will call on you.
So I'll go ahead. Very interesting, self-worth and self-esteem. This is really important because I think the majority of people would think that they have a very strong or high sense of self-esteem. Those people that are really accomplished, that have met their goals in life, or that are in pursuit of the careers that they thought that they would have liked to. Maybe they have money in the bank, and perhaps that they are viewed by their community as people who are pillars, and perhaps they believe that they have high self-esteem. But then somewhere on some level, their sense of self-worth is a little diminished. These things are very important to make these distinctions. One of the things I think about self-esteem versus self-worth is that self-worth is something that can be learned. As one of the commenters mentioned, when he was a child, he thought of being an astronaut. And at that time, the feedback that he got from his parents was that he could not be, or that was too hard. And I'm sure that that experience made him devalue his abilities, his gifts, or his talents, or even his aspirations. And maybe along the line in the rest of his life, he achieved other things, and he maybe felt good about himself, and that might have been by virtue of his sense of self-esteem being good. But the sense of self-worth and value, perhaps, is something that he might continue to be struggling with. And I say that just as only as an example, and I can't speak for his experience exactly. But what does that look like? It looks like we're nurturing two different ideals simultaneously. If we understood how the self-esteem was associated with the ego, and we understood how self-worth was associated with our belief systems, then we would understand we'd have to nurture, or I should say, constantly be excavating the belief systems to see what it is that we are actually living up to. In my work, I speak to expectation very powerfully, and how our expectations are made up of the beliefs that we have already been living within. And then what does it mean for someone who always aspired to be something, who was told that they could not, but still achieved in other areas of their life? And what does it look like when we can bring those two things into alignment, their deepest desires and the things that they'd like to do, and overcoming the self-limitations that were put on them by other people or their environment? What could that mean? What would it look like? How powerful could it be in that moment? When we think about an individual's self-worth and self-value and where it comes from, we go back to some of the early woundedness that they might have experienced in their life, or some of the early encouragement, whatever that might look like. But the self-worth and self-value is an individualized experience that I believe is based on their beliefs about who they are. And it is separate from the esteem that they might experience, that might be the very, I would just go to say, the momentum that they have. It might be It might be the more wrapped up in the inner dialogue that's about perseverance, and it has pushed them past certain things. But the self-worth and self-value could be in direct conflict. We have people who are big-time lawyers, big-time judges, really well accomplished, and their self-worth and self-value is at an all-time low. And that's because something's not in alignment, because they're distinctly different things.
Oh, lovely. Okay, next person, please. Who would like to go next? Can I call on Jane Elizabeth, maybe? Oh, Vanessa, sorry, go ahead.
Good either way. I think that self-esteem versus self-worth is I think people use them interchangeably, but I like the distinction that Sister Mutique was making. In terms of self-worth, I see that as really, it can be valued from the outside. And some of this can be semantics, but it can be, look how much I've achieved, like these high-powered lawyers or CEOs. I'm worth so much because I've done so much, I'm contributing so much, I've accomplished so much achievements. And to me, that's sort of more how people use it, that it is very much what have you achieved. And when you are viewing yourself that way, then there's no savoring of the moment, because it's always what's next. What's my next goal? What's my next achievement? Okay, I've gotten that award. I've gotten, that deal. I've accomplished this. You're always striving for what's next. And not that there's anything problematic about striving, but if there's no really valuing yourself in the moment and savoring what you've done and how you've made the world a better place for others, then I think we get caught in that myth that we have to achieve in order to be of value. And that's why we're never going to stop, and we're going to keep going, because we're always chasing that elusive value that will never exist unless it's an internalized. And that's where I think the self-esteem comes in, which is that you can esteem yourself no matter what. You may not like what you're doing or what you've been doing, or you may want something else, but you still have a basic sense that you matter and that you like who you are. And it makes it so much easier to achieve goals, if that's what you want, once you come from that place. And I think Dorit brought up this point about parents and making excuses for them. And I think so many of us do that as a way to push away the anger and resentment that we may feel, that it's like we don't want to believe that they're not these figures that we may have held up, or they did the best they could, that's all they knew. And I think that is making excuses for them. There's a way of holding account, like we were saying, accountability without the punishment. There's a way of holding them accountable that, yes, like I look in my situation, my father went through terrible things in his childhood, and he never really developed his capacity to connect with his children. And I was always told, by my mother, you have to understand he had a tough childhood. So I was always being told I'm supposed to understand his not connecting and having a relationship with us because he had such a tough life. And here I was as a kid thinking, well, why couldn't he worked on that? Why, like, I'm supposed to work on it. Why couldn't he? We all do make choices, and we do have certain blind spots. But I think that we do have choices about how we want to be and if we want to overcome things. And when we have children, there's certainly that mission statement for having your kids and how you want to be as a parent. And I just want to read a couple of other comments from viewers. Steve says, I think I held my self-worth but lost my self-esteem. I still thought I was able to be as unique as an astronaut, but no longer thought that I could achieve it, and lost any drive to fulfill my dreams. I believe I even sabotaged many times that I could have achieved something great. And I think having those messages early on can do a lot of damage until we start unpacking that and realizing that these were your parents' projections, and these were the reflections of their poor self-esteem. Because I think when people are negative or put others down, it always is a reflection of their own feelings about themselves. Johnny Martinez said that the world is not vegan. That can definitely impact our feelings of the worth of humans. David Wong, hi David, nice to see you, says self-worth is loving and accepting yourself fully. Absolutely. And Johnny says, I have self-worth, but this world/society does not recognize it, and it's systematic socialism. I'm not sure I understand. Men are worthless and the blame of everything. I'm not sure I hear that message in the world. We all hear different messages, and we all internalize things differently and think that we hear things differently based on what is happening for us. But thank you all for contributing your comments, and really enjoy and appreciate hearing them. And thank you for enriching our discussion.
Thank you, Jane Elizabeth.
Well, I think kind of similarly to what everybody else is saying here, self-worth is a constant in your life. So self-worth comes from the core of who you are. Self-esteem is more of a variable. So there's like an ebb and flow to self-esteem depending on the situation, depending on how you're feeling that day, depending on somewhat depending on that self-worth. So that self-worth, the good thing is this: both are flexible, both are fluid. You can absolutely change both. So the core of who you are, that self-worth, there are things you can do to actually change that, to improve the way you see yourself, and to actually see yourself as worthy of creating and having and living the life you truly deserve. So if you feel low right now, if you feel like you're unworthy, if your self-worth, the way you actually feel at your core about yourself and what you deserve and who you are, this is something that you can work on. So I really want to be sure that I say that, because sometimes people are like, okay, so if I don't have self-worth, if I don't feel worthy, if I don't recognize my own value, am I stuck there? No, you're not. So, self-worth, this is something that can go back to your childhood. It usually does when people can do things like even trying to dim your shine. So this is something that was done to me several times, and people still try to do it. But this is something that I learned to actually recognize, and it took me until a few years ago to recognize that when people were telling me to basically stop having big dreams, stop aspiring to greatness, kind of crapping all over what I wanted to do, for lack of a better term. This is something that really had a negative impact on my self-worth and how I viewed myself. Because just choose one thing and be good at that one thing. Or do you actually think you can do this or do that? So these are your dreams, these are your goals. I don't really think you can do that. And I was an overachiever my whole life because I was trying to prove that I was worthy. And the good thing is that my work ethic is killer. Absolutely. So there were some good things that actually came of that. And you'll actually see this with a lot of overachievers. We are the ones who are put down the most. We are the ones who are told that we were never good enough. We were the ones who were made to feel like we were never enough. We wanted love. We were trying to prove that we were worthy of love. And that's something that has an impact on your own value and your own self-worth and how you view yourself and the value you bring to the table, no matter what the conversation at that table. And you can work on that. And this goes back to what we were talking about before about boundaries, about setting boundaries with people who make you feel worthless, about standing up for yourself, about expecting that regardless of their own issues with their own self-worth, this is what it's really about. They don't have a right to treat you poorly. They do not have a right to be disrespectful to you, to be rude to you, to be unkind to you. They do not have that right. Nobody does. So, but you cannot control the way they treat you. You control your own response. And so that's something that I learned, and I'm trying to understand where they're coming from. So what's on the other side of that door in their life? Because I'm seeing, this interaction and understanding that they may have things going on and not using that as an excuse for their behavior, but understanding that there are things that they have not yet dealt with that are impacting the way they view the world, the way they view me and their own behavior, and then cutting that tie of responsibility, because I am not responsible for their behavior. So that is huge when it comes to your own self-worth, because we are so tied into the way other people treat us, and we allow that to tell us if we are worthy or not. And it has nothing to do with anybody else's behavior, nothing. And self-esteem, this is something that, can be knocked down a little bit, right? If we try something and it doesn't work, the good news is that you can actually learn to build your own resilience and learn from those times, those moments when you are knocked down, and say, okay, this is a learning moment, and this is going to actually make me stronger and more resilient. So, and then your self-esteem actually grows from those moments when you learn that everything that, was put there to, in your mind to knock you down and to make you feel unworthy, anything that was there to really dull your shine is actually there as a teaching moment to make you stronger and more resilient. And in my case, this has been such an amazing learning experience, because everything that I've learned along this journey, along my health and wellness and fitness journey, I'm passing that down to my daughter, instead of passing down that cycle of limiting beliefs and unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy habits. So it's really great to understand that you're not stuck where you are. You are not stuck feeling like you're in this constant state of coming from, be behind, being the underdog, being in last place all the time, no matter what you do. You're not stuck there. You're not stuck feeling like you are unworthy. So I think this is something that we need to really share with our audience, because we can talk about this and say, this is what this means. We need to also empower people to make sure that they understand that they can change the way they view themselves. They can learn to value themselves. They can learn that they are worthy of creating the life they truly deserve, and that their self-esteem is something that will kind of ebb and flow with each day, with each moment, with the situation. And it's okay, because you're going to have those moments where you think, gosh, I don't really know if I can do this. My self-esteem is a little bit lower, but then digging deep and understanding your own value, understanding your worth, and saying, you know what? I'm going to do this anyway. And when people do this, and this is something that you really want to do. I'm not saying do this like if you're uncomfortable and you don't feel like you should be doing something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying with something that you really want to do, but maybe you're scared, your self-esteem has taken a few hits. Taking that step back and saying, okay, you know what? I understand right now. I'm a little scared. I don't know if I can, because I've been told so many times I can't. And then digging deep and finding your own value, your own self-worth, and kind of using that as a springboard to create that self-esteem to actually move forward and to do those things anyway. And so that's the really great news about all of this, is that you can change and you can learn to value yourself.
Yes. And so I think building what you just said at the end, building our self-esteem based on our self-worth, I think our self-worth is something that we recognize. We don't have to do anything to achieve it. It's something we recognize. In other words, we recognize our own inner divinity. We can work towards the recognition of it, but we cannot build it, nor can we improve on it. It's just a recognition of our own inner divinity, which is where our own value, our own worthiness exists. However, our self-esteem has to do with doing. So self-worth has nothing to do with doing. It's just the being of us. It's recognizing that inner divine self. But the self-esteem has to do with titles and awards and accolades. It's what we do. It's the doing that builds self-esteem. And so when you said we use self-worth as a springboard to build self-esteem, that made a lot of sense to me, Jane, because that is actually something that most of us do not recognize we do, which goes back to Sister Motique's example of the judges and attorneys. Their self-esteem might be high because of what they achieve, but their feeling of self-worth is not. And if you do not recognize your own self-worth, you'll always be chasing something else to build self-esteem constantly, and you never will get there. And so that is why I think parenting is the most dangerous job in the world. And which is why I said, I want none of it. So we need to wrap up. So I would want to ask the panel the last thing, because this goes together with what we were saying before, over empathizing, and why we over empathize, and the detrimental effects that can give us, and what does it have, what does then over empathizing or lack of empathizing have to do with our self-esteem? Can we bring them all together? Because there's also the lack of empathy. And there's some people who cannot feel empathy. They could if they were actually, if they recognize their own self-worth, but it's just a recognition that has to happen. And for that to happen, sometimes actually jail does work, I think. I know so many people who have said, it's when I was in jail that I woke up and I realized blah, 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 blah. Now, does jail, a massive jailing of people work? Absolutely not. Does it work in every case? Absolutely not. So what do you think? There's such a fine line. How would you like, because of all the things we're discussing here today, and I like to pull things together at the end and bring everything together, how does this whole thing of punishment and self-esteem and empathy and recognition of self-worth, how does this for you? How do you wish to use this in your the knowledge of this? How can this help you in your own daily life as you go through life in creating your own resilience? And who would like to start? Just raise a hand. Okay, Vanessa, there you go.
I wanted to read some of our comments real quickly first, which is that Steve says, let's see, self-worth static, built at the core, which doesn't change without working on it, but is only dependent on self. And Johnny is saying, I love this. You vegans give me inspiration for many years now. Thank you for that. And George says, too attached to outcomes and how others perceive us versus the internal worth and value. Yeah, I think that that when we are looking at achievement or what we're doing externally or how others feel about us, we're getting away from that internal sense. And I want to bring it back when we were talking about the empathy, over empathizing, or a lack of empathy. I think those are all reflections. Could somebody mute themselves? There's a lot of noise right now. If somebody could, if you could all mute your mics. Thank you. Yes. So I think that when we have a balanced sense of our importance, that we matter in the world and everyone matters, it's not that I'm more or less important, that we all have value and matter, and that my life has meaning and is important to me. I think that is when we can have this balanced sense that we're all in this, we're all connected. We're all very different and unique, but we're all connected. Every life form is connected. That's when I think we have a balanced sense of empathy, where it's not going to be to my detriment or your detriment. That would be the over empathizing or the under empathizing, is that when we're taking good care of ourselves and are clear on how we want to be treated, on what's okay, what is the cause for us to walk away, step away from the relationship for the moment, or more on a long-term basis, or whatever choice we have, that happens when we're not really perceiving our own value. And that when we do perceive it, that's when we can come from a place of love and compassion, but with very firm boundaries, that this is not going to work for me, or I hear your pain, I'm here for you, I'm here to listen, and that it affects me, but I won't let it hurt me in any way. So I think it's having that strong and very clear sense of our worth and value that is an internal state. It's not based on externals or achievements, but when we have that really firm sense, that's when we can have an approach where we do have empathy for others. We do see their struggles, we see their plight, but we're still able to maintain our good boundaries and take care of ourselves first. And that we can't be of service to others when we're suffering and we're struggling. I always think of on the airplane, when you put on your oxygen mask, they always say to put it on first and then put it on your child, because you can't be there for your child if you're not able to breathe. And so I know I've gotten into this thing where I feel like it's okay if I suffer because I have to save, all these billions of suffering beings out there. But I can't truly be of service to them, and I can't truly help them if I'm struggling and I'm suffering. And then I'm adding to the number. If there's 6 billion struggling, I'm suffering, I'm then adding one more of me, and that's not helping. So I think we really have to take care of ourselves in order to be that positive influence in the world and to have that balanced sense of empathy.
Thank you, Vanessa. So we actually are going over. So just 30 seconds if both the other two panelists would just wrap up in just 30 seconds, please, and let me know who'd like to go first.
I can go.
Okay, you'll have to unmute yourself first. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Jane.
I can go.
Go ahead.
Okay, so kind of wrapping up in 30 seconds or less, I would say that self-value and self-worth, that really allows you to, once you understand your own value, that allows you to set clear boundaries, that allows you to really be that person who is able to then give other people the tools they need to live their best life, to create that life they deserve. That allows you to actually be there for other people and be there for the animals and be there for the environment. So setting boundaries is a really good thing. You understand, once you do set boundaries, once you do understand your own self-worth, that other people also have value and that worth, and that they are worthy of creating that life they deserve. And furthermore, I think, once you understand that you are not here to actually rescue other people from themselves, you're here to teach other people, to be there for other people, to be kind, to be compassionate. And when you are aligned with who you really are, and you recognize your own worth, that is when you can truly, with clear boundaries, be there for other people, to help guide them. You be that light that they need. It is not your job to run out and rescue people. They will come to you. You can be that light and have those boundaries and take care of you, at yourself, at your core, so that you can continue to show up for everybody else.
Oh, thank you. So, Sister Muti, could you unmute yourself, please? Thank you.
Yes. I would first like to say thank you again, Dorit, for inviting me. It was great to sit with you other panelists. Thank you so much. I would say, how powerful would it be for you to envision living a life of great self-worth, great self-value, so much so that it emanates from you at all times, raising and elevating all the people around you? How powerful would it be if you weren't concerned about how they were receiving that great, wonderful light and power that you are, but that instead you envisioned that they were affected by it in such a powerful way that their life too is expanding, and that the accelerated evolution that was meant to be taking place on this planet had some in part to do with the way that you showed up in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Everyone listening in, I'm sure you'd like to say more. Please go ahead. Even when we come off, you can go ahead and keep typing in whatever it is that you'd like to communicate. Until next week, Wednesday, same time, same place.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. And remember, to create resilience, you first have to show up for yourselves. Bye for now. Until next week.
Thank you.